In the vast darkness between stars, where civilizations rise and fall like waves against cosmic shores, one truth echoes through every corner of the galaxy. Humans are expendable. They serve as mercenaries, laborers, and cannon fodder for the great empires that rule the void. No empire expects loyalty from them. No throne considers them worthy of honor. But when a single human mechanic throws himself into the path of an assassin's blade meant for an alien princess, everything changes. His sacrifice awakens something the galaxy has forgotten, that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from those who rule, but from those willing to die for others. Now, as that princess ascends to her throne as queen, she remembers the human who saved her life. And in a galaxy where humans are seen as nothing more than tools, she's about to show them what it means when a queen decides to claim one as her own. This is the story of Marcus Chun, a human who thought he was nobody special. He was wrong. The maintenance bay of the Zephyrian Royal Transport ship hummed with the constant noise of machinery and the quiet conversations of workers from a dozen different species. Marcus Chun wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his grease-stained hand, leaving another dark smudge on his already dirty jumpsuit. The massive engines of the transport required constant attention, and, as one of only 3 human mechanics aboard, Marcus had learned to keep his head down and his mouth shut. He had been working on these ships for almost 5 years now, ever since the Terran Colonial Authority had sold his contract to the Zephyrian Empire. It wasn't slavery, technically. The contracts were legal under galactic law. But when your home planet couldn't afford to feed its people and alien empires offered good money for human workers, the line between choice and necessity became very thin. Chun, the sharp voice of Supervisor Vextar, cut through the engine noise. The tall, blue-skinned Zephyrian stood at the entrance to the maintenance bay, his 4 arms crossed in obvious displeasure. Princess Lyraliai's personal shuttle needs immediate inspection. Some fool reported a possible fuel leak. Marcus nodded and grabbed his toolkit. Princess Lyraliai was the youngest daughter of Emperor Throndar, and her shuttle was the finest piece of engineering on the ship. Working on it was both an honor and a risk. If anything went wrong, the human mechanic would be the first one blamed. The princess's shuttle sat in the royal hangar, surrounded by guards wearing the golden armor of the Imperial Guard. These weren't ordinary soldiers. Each guard was a member of an elite warrior species, chosen for their loyalty and combat skills. They watched Marcus with barely concealed contempt as he approached the shuttle. "Hurry up, human," growled one of the guards, a massive reptilian creature with scales that gleamed like black metal. "The princess needs her shuttle ready within the hour." Marcus began his inspection, running his scanner over the fuel lines and checking each connection. The shuttle was beautiful, with smooth curves and advanced systems that most humans could only dream of seeing. As he worked, he couldn't help but admire the craftsmanship. Whoever had built this ship had truly understood their art. 20 minutes into his inspection, Marcus heard voices approaching. He glanced up to see Princess Lyraliai herself walking toward the shuttle, accompanied by her personal guard and several court officials. The princess was young, perhaps equivalent to a human in her early 20s, with the characteristic blue skin and silver hair of the Zephyrian royal family. She moved with grace and confidence, but Marcus noticed something else in her posture. Tension. Fear, perhaps. "Your Highness," one of the officials was saying as they approached, "perhaps it would be better to delay your departure until tomorrow. The security reports from Kepler Station are concerning." Princess Lyraliai shook her head, causing her long silver hair to catch the light from the hangar's illumination panels. "Lord Veximel, I appreciate your concern, but the trade negotiations cannot wait. The Andromedan delegation has already been delayed twice. If we postpone again, they may withdraw from the talks entirely." Marcus continued his work, pretending not to listen. Royal politics were far above his pay grade, and showing too much interest in such things could get a human in serious trouble. But he couldn't help noticing the worried expressions on the faces of the princess's guards. "How is the inspection proceeding?" Princess Lyraliai asked, suddenly, addressing Marcus directly. Marcus nearly dropped his scanner in surprise. Members of the royal family rarely spoke directly to human workers. "Nearly complete, Your Highness. The fuel lines are clean, no leaks detected." Just need to check the navigation systems. Good. The princess nodded. Lord Vex Immel, please prepare for departure. As the officials moved away to make their preparations, Marcus climbed into the shuttle's cockpit to run diagnostics on the navigation computer. The system was incredibly sophisticated, with quantum processors that could calculate hyperspace jumps with accuracy measured in micrometers. He ran through each test sequence, checking every component. That's when he saw it. Hidden among the normal navigation files was something that didn't belong. A small program, barely visible unless you knew exactly what to look for. Marcus had seen similar programs before, during his training on Earth. It was an override code, the kind used to take remote control of a ship's systems. His hands began to shake as he realized what he was looking at. Someone had planted a program that would allow them to control the princess's shuttle from a distance. They could crash it, fly it into an asteroid, or simply shut down life support while the princess was aboard. Marcus looked around the hangar. The guards, the officials, the maintenance crews, any one of them could be involved. Or maybe none of them knew. Maybe the saboteur was somewhere else entirely, waiting for the princess to launch so they could activate their program. He could report this. Should report it. But to whom? If he was wrong, if this was some kind of legitimate security program he didn't understand, he would be punished severely for accessing royal navigation systems without permission. Humans had been executed for less. But if he was right, and he said nothing, Princess Lyralii would die. Marcus made his decision. He began working frantically to remove the malicious program, his fingers flying over the control interfaces. The code was sophisticated, clearly the work of someone with advanced knowledge of Zephyrian technology. As he worked, he could hear the princess and her entourage preparing for departure. Marcus Chun. The voice behind him was cold and unfamiliar. He turned to see a figure in the robes of a court technician, but something was wrong. The robes were slightly the wrong color, and the technician's movements were too stiff, too controlled. As Marcus watched, the figure reached into his robes and withdrew a weapon that gleamed with deadly purpose. Step away from the console, the assassin said quietly. Your interference ends now. Marcus's mind raced. The assassin couldn't kill him here, not with the royal guard so close. But if Marcus moved away from the console, the assassin could reactivate the sabotage program. The princess would die, and no one would ever know it was murder. I don't think so, Marcus said, turning back to the console and continuing his work on the program. Foolish human. The assassin moved closer, raising his weapon. You cannot stop what has already begun. Marcus could hear the whine of the weapon charging. In seconds, he would be dead. But maybe he could finish removing the program first. Maybe the princess would be safe. Then he heard Princess Lyralii's voice, much closer than before. Is everything ready? We need to depart immediately. She was coming toward the shuttle. If the assassin fired his weapon, she might be caught in the blast. Or worse, the assassin might decide to complete his mission in a more direct way. Without thinking, Marcus launched himself away from the console and directly at the assassin. The weapon fired just as Marcus tackled the robed figure, the energy blast going wide and striking the shuttle's hull. Alarms began blaring throughout the hangar as the impact triggered emergency systems. Marcus and the assassin rolled across the deck, fighting for control of the weapon. The assassin was stronger, but Marcus fought with the desperation of someone who knew that failure meant death for an innocent person. They crashed into maintenance equipment, scattering tools and spare parts across the deck. Assassin, Marcus shouted as loudly as he could. Protect the princess. The royal guards reacted instantly, their training taking over. They formed a protective circle around Princess Lyralii, while others rushed toward the fight. But the assassin was skilled, and he broke free from Marcus's grip long enough to aim his weapon again. This time, he aimed directly at Princess Lyralii. Marcus saw the weapon turning toward the princess, and knew he couldn't reach the assassin in time. But he could put himself between the weapon and its target. Without hesitation, he threw himself into the path of the energy beam. The blast struck him in the chest, and Marcus felt pain like nothing he had ever experienced. It was as if every nerve in his body was on fire, as if his very atoms were being torn apart. He fell to the deck, his vision blurring as shock set in. Through the haze of pain, he saw the royal guards overwhelm the assassin. The threat was over. The princess was safe. Princess Lyralii knelt beside him, her silver eyes wide with shock, and something else. Respect, perhaps, or gratitude. Why? She asked quietly, her voice barely audible over the continuing alarms. Why would you risk your life for me? Marcus tried to speak, but his throat felt like it was filled with sand. Finally, he managed to whisper, someone had to. As consciousness faded, Marcus heard the princess giving orders for medical teams, for security sweeps, for investigation of the shuttle systems. Her voice carried a new note of authority, as if his sacrifice had awakened something within her. When Marcus next opened his eyes, he was in the ship's medical bay. The walls were white and sterile, and the air smelled of antiseptic. He tried to sit up, and immediately regretted it as pain shot through his chest. Easy, said a gentle voice. A medical technician, one of the insectoid klitch species, was monitoring instruments beside his bed. You suffered severe energy burn. Lucky to be alive. The princess, Marcus croaked. Is she safe? Princess is well, the technician assured him. Thanks to your actions. The investigation revealed extensive sabotage of her shuttle systems. Without your intervention, the royal shuttle would have suffered catastrophic failure during hyperspace transit. Marcus closed his eyes in relief. It had been worth it then. The pain, the fear, all of it had been worth it to save an innocent life. The princess wishes to speak with you, the technician continued. When you are strong enough. Over the next few days, as Marcus recovered from his injuries, he learned more about what had happened. The assassin had been working for a rebel faction that sought to destabilize the Zephyrian Empire by eliminating members of the royal family. The sabotage of the princess's shuttle had been just the beginning of a larger plot that was now unraveling under investigation. But Marcus also learned something else, something that surprised him. Princess Lyralii had personally overseen his medical care, ensuring that he received the best treatment available. She had also launched an investigation into the working conditions of human contract laborers aboard royal vessels. When Princess Lyralii finally visited him in the medical bay, Marcus tried to sit up respectfully, but she gestured for him to remain lying down. I owe you a debt, she said without preamble. You saved my life at great risk to your own. Such courage should not go unrewarded. I was just doing what was right, Your Highness, Marcus replied. The princess studied him for a long moment. Most beings in the galaxy would not agree with you. They would say that a human contract laborer has no business risking his life for Zephyrian royalty. They would say that such sacrifice is foolish and meaningless. Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that, so he remained silent. But I believe they are wrong, Princess Lyralii continued. What you did was not foolish. It was noble. And nobility, true nobility, has nothing to do with birth or species. It comes from here. She placed her hand over her heart. From the willingness to put others before yourself. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. When you are recovered, I would like to offer you a position in my personal guard. The pay is considerably better than maintenance work, and the duties are more interesting. Marcus stared at her in shock. A human in the royal guard was unheard of. Your Highness, I'm honored, but I'm not a soldier. I'm just a mechanic. Princess Lyralii smiled, the first time Marcus had seen her do so. You are much more than that, Marcus Chin. And perhaps it is time the galaxy learned that humans are capable of much more than they have been allowed to show. After she left, Marcus lay in his medical bed thinking about her offer. His old life as a contract laborer had been simple, if not particularly fulfilling. But the princess was offering him something more. A chance to prove that humans could be trusted with important responsibilities. A chance to show that they were more than just expendable labor. It was a dangerous opportunity. If he failed, if he made mistakes, it wouldn't just reflect on him personally. It would confirm every prejudice the galaxy held about humans. But if he succeeded, if he could prove himself worthy of the trust the princess was placing in him, it might change things for other humans as well. The medical technician returned to check his vitals, noting the improved readings on the monitoring equipment. Your recovery progresses well. Princess Lyralii will be pleased. She really meant it, didn't she? Marcus asked. About the position in her guard. The technician's compound eyes reflected the light as he nodded. Princess Lyralii is known for her integrity. When she gives her word, she keeps it. But Be warned, service in the Royal Guard is not easy. The training is difficult, the duties are dangerous, and the standards are very high. Marcus nodded, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing injuries. I understand. Do you? The technician asked. This is not just about you, Marcus Chun. If the princess places a human in her personal guard, it will send ripples throughout the empire. There are those who will not approve. There are those who will see it as a sign of weakness, or worse, as a betrayal of Zephyrian traditions. The implications were becoming clearer to Marcus. By saving the princess's life, he had done more than prevent an assassination. He had changed the trajectory of his own life, and possibly the lives of other humans throughout the galaxy. Over the next week, as Marcus regained his strength, he received visits from various members of the ship's crew. Some came to thank him for his heroism. Others came out of curiosity, wanting to see the human who had risked everything for an alien princess. A few came with barely concealed hostility, making it clear that they disapproved of the attention he was receiving. But the most significant visit came from Commander Zethklar, the head of Princess Lyraliai's personal security. The massive warrior, whose species was known for their fierce loyalty and combat prowess, studied Marcus with eyes that seemed to see everything. So, Commander Zethklar said after a long silence, "You are the human who wishes to join my guards." "If the princess will have me," Marcus replied. "The princess has already decided. The question is whether you understand what you are accepting." Commander Zethklar moved closer to Marcus's bedside. "My guards are the finest warriors in the Empire. They are chosen not just for their combat skills, but for their absolute loyalty to the royal family. They would die without question to protect Princess Lyraliai. Are you prepared for that level of commitment?" Marcus met the commander's gaze steadily. "I already almost died to protect her. I think that answers your question." Commander Zethklar smiled grimly. "Indeed it does. But throwing yourself at an assassin in the heat of the moment is different from the day-to-day dedication required of a royal guard. Every moment of every day, you will need to be alert, ready to sacrifice everything for her safety. Can a human sustain that level of commitment?" The question stung, but Marcus realized it was fair. Humans had a reputation throughout the galaxy for being unreliable, for looking out for their own interests first. He would need to prove that he was different. "Give me the chance to prove it," Marcus said. "Oh, I intend to," Commander Zethklar replied. "Your training will begin as soon as the medical staff clears you for duty. Be warned, it will be the most difficult thing you have ever done. I will push you harder than any human has ever been pushed, because the princess's life may depend on your preparation." As Marcus continued to recover, news of the assassination attempt and his heroic intervention spread throughout the ship and beyond. By the time they reached their destination at Kepler Station, the story had taken on a life of its own. A human contract laborer had saved a Zephyrian princess, risking his own life without thought of reward. For some, it was an inspiring tale of courage and selflessness. For others, it was an uncomfortable reminder that their assumptions about humans might be wrong. And, for a few, it was a dangerous precedent that threatened the established order of galactic civilization. But, for Marcus, lying in his medical bed and contemplating the future that lay ahead, it was simply the beginning of something he had never imagined possible. He had always been told that humans were destined for menial labor, that they were too unreliable and short-lived to be trusted with important responsibilities. Princess Lyraliai was about to prove that the galaxy had been wrong about humans. And Marcus Chun, a simple mechanic who had thrown himself at an assassin without thinking, was going to help her do it. 3 weeks after the assassination attempt, Marcus stood in the Royal Guard training facility, sweat pouring down his face as he struggled to complete another set of combat exercises. His body ached in places he didn't know could ache, and his lungs burned from the intense physical demands that Commander Zethklar had placed upon him. Again, the commander barked, his voice echoing through the training hall. "A real assassin will not wait for you to catch your breath." Marcus gripped his training weapon tighter and moved back into position. The weapon was a Zephyrian combat staff, designed to channel energy bursts while also serving as a physical fighting implement. It was heavier than anything humans normally used, and mastering it required strength, speed, and precision that pushed Marcus beyond what he thought were his limits. Around him, The other members of Princess Laureliai's guard watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely concealed skepticism. These were warriors from the finest military species in the galaxy. The honor-bound Krellian fighters, the lightning-fast Vexthani scouts, the heavily armored Rhodesian heavy infantry. Each of them had trained from childhood for their roles as elite protectors. And then there was Marcus, a human mechanic who had stumbled into their ranks through an act of desperate courage. "Your footwork is improving," said Sergeant Killiner, one of the Krellian fighters, as Marcus completed the exercise sequence. "But you still telegraph your attacks." An experienced opponent would see your moves coming from across the room. Marcus nodded, grateful for any constructive feedback. The other guards had been surprisingly supportive during his training, even if they doubted his ultimate effectiveness. They respected what he had done for their princess, even if they questioned whether he belonged among their ranks. "The human learns quickly," observed Corporal Vexthani, a member of the scout species known for their incredible speed and agility. "His reflexes are adequate, and his determination is notable." Coming from Vexthani, that was high praise. The scout species rarely complimented anyone, considering most other beings too slow and clumsy to deserve their attention. "Determination alone will not stop a blade," Commander Zethklar reminded them all. "Chun, you have improved significantly in the past weeks, but you still have far to go. Tomorrow we begin weapons training with live energy charges." Marcus suppressed a groan. The training weapons they had been using delivered harmless light pulses when they made contact. Live energy charges would actually hurt, providing immediate and painful feedback for any mistakes. It was necessary for proper training, but Marcus wasn't looking forward to it. As the other guards filed out of the training facility, Commander Zethklar approached Marcus. "Walk with me," he said. They left the training hall and walked through the corridors of the royal transport, which had been refitted with additional security measures following the assassination attempt. Marcus had learned that Princess Laurelii had insisted on the upgrades, determined to ensure that no future attacks could succeed. "You wonder why I push you so hard," Commander Zethklar said as they walked. "I understand the necessity," Marcus replied. "The princess's safety depends on my competence." "True, but there is more to it than that." The commander stopped near a viewing window that showed the stars rushing past as they traveled through hyperspace. "Do you know what happened to the last human who served in a royal guard?" Marcus shook his head. He hadn't even known that humans had ever served in such positions. His name was David Martinez. This was 40 years ago, during the reign of Emperor Throndar's father. A human diplomat had impressed the court with his negotiating skills, and the old emperor decided to appoint him to a position of trust. Commander Zethklar's expression was grim. Within 6 months, Martinez had been caught selling military secrets to the Andromedan Federation. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. "I see. Do you?" The commander turned to face him directly. That betrayal shaped how the entire galaxy views humans. It confirmed every prejudice, every assumption about human nature. It is the reason why humans have been relegated to manual labor and expendable positions for the past 4 decades. Marcus felt the weight of that history settling on his shoulders. "And now Princess Laurelii is giving us another chance." "She is giving you another chance," Commander Zethklar corrected. "If you fail, if you betray her trust or prove unable to fulfill your duties, it will not just reflect on you. It will doom every human in the galaxy to continued servitude." The pressure was immense, but Marcus found that it didn't frighten him as much as he thought it would. Instead, it clarified his purpose. This wasn't just about his own future anymore. It was about proving that humans deserved better than the galaxy had given them. "I won't fail," Marcus said quietly. "I believe you won't," Commander Zethklar replied. "But belief is not enough. That is why your training will be twice as rigorous as what any other guard endures. You must be not just competent, but exceptional. You must be so skilled, so reliable, so loyal, that no one can question your worthiness for this position." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from the ship's communication system. Commander Zethklar to the bridge immediately. Priority Alpha. Priority Alpha was the highest level of alert on a royal vessel. Commander Zethklar and Marcus ran toward the bridge, where they found Princess Laurelii in heated discussion with the ship's captain and several other officers. "Commander," the princess said as they arrived, "we have received intelligence about another assassination attempt. This one planned for Kepler Station." Captain Doranth, a veteran Zephyrian officer, gestured to the holographic display showing their destination. "Our sources indicate that rebel forces have infiltrated the station's security systems. They plan to strike during the trade negotiations." "Recommendations?" Commander Zethklar asked. "The logical course would be to postpone the negotiations and return to Zephyr Prime," said Lord Veximel, the princess's senior advisor. "We can reschedule once proper security arrangements have been made." Princess Lyralii shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. These negotiations are critical to our trade relationships with 12 different species. If we postpone again, some of our partners may decide that the Zephyrian Empire is too unstable to deal with." "Your Highness," Captain Doranth said carefully, "the risk to your safety is considerable." "The risk to our empire's future is greater," the princess replied. "We will proceed as planned." Marcus listened to the discussion, noting how Princess Lyralii balanced the various concerns and interests. She was young, but she demonstrated the kind of strategic thinking that marked a true leader. She understood that sometimes personal risk had to be accepted for the greater good. "Very well," Commander Zethklar said. "We will implement enhanced security protocols. All guards will be on high alert from the moment we dock until we depart." As the meeting broke up, Princess Lyralii approached Marcus. "How is your training progressing?" "Well, Your Highness, Commander Zethklar is an excellent instructor." "I'm sure he is." She smiled slightly. "He's also probably told you about David Martinez." Marcus nodded, surprised that she knew about that conversation. "The commander tells that story to every new guard, regardless of species," the princess explained. "It's his way of emphasizing the importance of loyalty. But, in your case, the story carries additional weight." "Yes, Your Highness. I want you to know that I don't hold the actions of one human against all humans," she said. "David Martinez made his own choices. They don't define your species any more than the actions of any individual define mine." "Thank you, Your Highness. But others will not be so understanding," she continued. "There will be those who watch your every move, waiting for you to prove their prejudices correct. Are you prepared for that scrutiny?" Marcus thought about it carefully before responding. "I've lived with prejudice my entire life, Your Highness. The difference now is that I have the opportunity to prove those prejudices wrong." Princess Lyralii studied him for a moment, then nodded approvingly. "Good answer." The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation as they approached Kepler Station. Marcus continued his training, but now it took on new urgency. Commander Zethklar drilled the guards on station layouts, emergency procedures, and threat assessment protocols. "Kepler Station is a maze," the commander explained during one briefing. "Thousands of corridors, multiple levels, and hundreds of potential hiding spots for assassins. We cannot secure the entire facility, so we must create a protective bubble around the princess and move that bubble safely through the station." Marcus studied the station schematics, memorizing every detail. The trade negotiations would take place in the central conference complex, but Princess Lyralii would also attend several social events and inspect key facilities. Each location presented its own security challenges. "Chun," Commander Zethklar said, "you will be assigned to close protection duty during the negotiations. Stay within arm's reach of the princess at all times." The assignment was both an honor and a test. Close protection was the most critical and demanding role for a guard. It required split-second decision-making and absolute dedication to the protectee's safety. "Understood, sir," Marcus replied. When they finally docked at Kepler Station, Marcus was struck by the sheer scale of the facility. The station was essentially a city in space, home to over 2 million beings from dozens of different species. The docking bay alone was larger than most human settlements. Princess Lyralii's arrival was met with considerable ceremony. Representatives from the various trading partners had assembled to greet her, and the station's administrators had spared no expense in decorating the reception area. But Marcus noticed the security measures hidden among the pageantry: additional guards at key positions, subtle sensor sweeps, and carefully controlled crowd movements. The first day of negotiations proceeded without incident, but Marcus could feel the tension in the air. Commander Zethklar had positioned guards throughout the conference complex, and everyone was alert for signs of trouble. Marcus stayed close to Princess Lyrelii as she moved between meeting rooms, participated in formal dinners, and conducted the delicate diplomacy required to maintain the Empire's trading relationships. He was impressed by her skill in handling the various personalities and competing interests around the table. The Andromedan delegation was particularly difficult, raising objections to nearly every proposal and threatening to withdraw from several existing agreements. The Centauri merchants were focused entirely on profit margins and seemed indifferent to the broader political implications of their demands. The vegan representatives kept requesting special provisions for their unique biology that would be expensive to accommodate. Through it all, Princess Lyrelii remained calm and professional, finding creative solutions and building consensus among groups that had little natural sympathy for each other. Marcus began to understand why these negotiations were so important to the Empire's future. On the second day, during a break between sessions, Marcus noticed something that made his blood run cold. One of the station's maintenance workers was moving through the conference complex with a toolkit that looked wrong. The tools were the right type for maintenance work, but they were arranged in a pattern that Marcus recognized from his own years as a mechanic. It was the arrangement used when you needed to access restricted systems quickly and quietly. Marcus activated his communication device and sent a discreet alert to Commander Zethklar. Then, he began moving closer to the suspicious maintenance worker, trying to get a better look at the toolkit. The worker noticed Marcus's approach and immediately changed direction, heading toward a service corridor that led away from the conference rooms. Marcus followed, keeping his distance but maintaining visual contact. In the service corridor, the worker stopped and turned to face Marcus. Up close, Marcus could see that the being's movements were too controlled, too precise for a typical maintenance worker. This was someone with combat training trying to blend in among the station's crew. "You should not have followed me," the fake maintenance worker said, reaching into his toolkit. Marcus didn't wait to see what weapon the assassin would draw. He lunged forward, tackling the disguised killer before he could complete his draw. They crashed into a bank of environmental control systems, setting off alarms throughout that section of the station. The assassin was skilled, but Marcus had spent the last month training with some of the finest warriors in the galaxy. More importantly, he had the advantage of surprise and desperation. While the assassin had expected to complete his mission unopposed, Marcus was prepared to fight with everything he had. They rolled across the corridor floor, each trying to gain control of the assassin's weapon. Marcus managed to land several solid blows, but the assassin species was naturally stronger than humans, and he gradually began to overpower Marcus. Just as the assassin broke free and raised his weapon, Commander Zethklar arrived with two other guards. They subdued the attacker quickly and efficiently, preventing any chance of him reaching Princess Lyrelii. "How did you know?" Commander Zethklar asked as they secured the prisoner. "His toolkit," Marcus explained, still breathing heavily from the fight. "It was arranged wrong. No real maintenance worker would carry their tools that way." "You recognized a specific pattern in tool arrangement?" Commander Zethklar looked impressed despite himself. "I spent 5 years as a mechanic. You learn to notice things like that." Later, after the prisoner had been thoroughly interrogated and additional security measures implemented, Princess Lyrelii sought out Marcus in the medical bay where he was being treated for minor injuries sustained in the fight. "Once again, I find myself in your debt," she said. "Just doing my job, Your Highness." "Are you?" she asked. "Because what you did today went far beyond standard guard duties. You identified a threat that none of our security experts noticed, and you neutralized it at considerable personal risk." Marcus wasn't sure how to respond to that. He had simply acted on instinct and training. "I've been thinking about our conversation regarding human potential," Princess Lyrelii continued. "Today you proved something important, not just to me, but to everyone who witnessed your actions. You proved that humans bring unique skills and perspectives that can benefit the Empire. Your Highness, your background as a mechanic allowed you to spot something that trained security officers missed. Your willingness to act decisively prevented another assassination attempt. These are not the actions of someone who is merely expendable labor." The princess paused. Then, continued with a note of determination in her voice. When these negotiations conclude, I intend to recommend to my father that the Empire establish new policies regarding human integration into positions of responsibility, starting with expanding the Royal Guard program to include qualified humans. The implications of such a policy change were staggering. It would represent a fundamental shift in how the Empire viewed humans and their capabilities. That's very generous, Your Highness. But are you sure the Empire is ready for such changes? The Empire will adapt, Princess Lyralii said firmly. Change is never easy, but it is sometimes necessary. The galaxy is evolving, and we must evolve with it or be left behind. As Marcus recovered from his latest encounter with would-be assassins, he reflected on how much his life had changed in just a few weeks. From anonymous mechanic to royal guard to symbol of human potential, it was almost too much to comprehend. But he also understood the weight of responsibility that came with these changes. Every action he took would be scrutinized, every decision analyzed for signs of weakness or betrayal. The future of human-Zephyrian relations might depend on his ability to prove himself worthy of the trust Princess Lyralii had placed in him. The trade negotiations concluded successfully, with most of the trading partners signing new agreements that would benefit the Empire for years to come. Princess Lyralii's diplomatic skills had overcome the various obstacles and competing interests, creating a framework for continued cooperation among the diverse species involved. As they prepared to depart Kepler Station, Commander Zethklar approached Marcus with news that would change everything again. The princess has received word from Zephyr Prime, he said. Emperor Throndar is calling her home immediately. There have been significant political developments that require her immediate attention. What kind of developments? Marcus asked. The kind that determine the future of empires, Commander Zethklar replied grimly. And the kind that will test everything you have learned about being a royal guard. The journey back to Zephyr Prime took 3 days through hyperspace, but for Marcus it felt like an eternity. The entire ship buzzed with tension as news filtered in about the political crisis engulfing the Zephyrian Empire. Emperor Throndar was seriously ill, possibly dying, and the various factions within the Empire were already maneuvering for position in the succession struggle that would follow. Princess Lyralii spent most of the journey in conference with her advisors, reviewing intelligence reports and preparing for the challenges that awaited her on the homeworld. Marcus remained at his post outside the conference room, but he couldn't help overhearing fragments of the discussions that painted a grim picture of imperial politics. The Duke of Vextar has already begun consolidating power in the outer provinces, reported Lord Vex Immel during one session. He claims to be acting to preserve stability, but his true intentions are obvious. And Prince Kethmoran? Princess Lyralii asked about her older brother. Missing, came the troubling reply. He disappeared 3 days ago during a hunting expedition. Search teams have found no trace of him. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. In royal families, disappearances during succession crises were rarely accidental. Someone was eliminating potential heirs to the throne. What about the military? Princess Lyralii asked. Split. Admiral Zeth Korvan replied via communication link from the capital. The 3rd Fleet remains loyal to your father, but the 7th Fleet has declared for Duke Vextar. The 1st and 5th Fleets are maintaining neutrality for now. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. If Emperor Throndar died without a clear succession plan, the Empire could collapse into civil war. Billions of beings across hundreds of worlds would suffer as military forces battled for control. Commander Zethklar briefed the guards on the security situation they would face upon arrival. Intelligence suggests that multiple factions have infiltrated the capital. Assassins, saboteurs, and spies are operating throughout the city. We must assume that any individual we encounter could be a potential threat. What about the palace guard? Asked Sergeant Kielaner. Compromised. The commander replied grimly. Duke Vextar has sympathizers among the guard commanders. We cannot trust palace security to protect the princess. Marcus raised his hand. Sir, if the palace isn't safe, where will the princess stay? She will go directly to the emperor's presence, Commander Zethklar explained. Her place is at his side, regardless of the danger. Our job is to ensure she survives long enough to reach him. The plan was ambitious and risky. They would land at the capital spaceport and proceed immediately to the Imperial Palace, fighting their way through whatever opposition they encountered. If Emperor Throndar was indeed dying, Princess Lyralii needed to be present for his final moments and any succession declaration he might make. As they dropped out of hyperspace and approached Zephyr Prime, Marcus got his first look at the homeworld of the Zephyrian Empire. It was a beautiful planet, with deep blue oceans and silver continents that gleamed in the light of its twin suns. The capital city of Throndar stretched for thousands of kilometers along the planet's equator, a testament to the Empire's power and wealth. But, even from orbit, Marcus could see signs of the unfolding crisis. Military ships were positioned throughout the system, and several space stations showed damage from recent fighting. The Empire was already at war with itself. All guards, prepare for combat deployment, Commander Zethklar announced over the ship's communication system. We will be landing in a potentially hostile environment. Marcus checked his equipment one final time. He had come a long way from the simple toolkit of a maintenance worker, but he still felt the weight of responsibility that came with protecting Princess Lyralii. The combat armor felt strange on his body, and the energy weapons were still unfamiliar in his hands. But his training had prepared him as well as possible for what lay ahead. Princess Lyralii emerged from her conference room wearing the formal robes of a Zephyrian royal, but Marcus noticed that she had also donned light armor beneath the ceremonial garments. She was prepared for war. "Your Highness," Commander Zethklar said as they prepared for landing, "the situation on the ground is fluid. We may need to adapt our plans based on what we encounter." "Understood," the princess replied. "My priority is reaching my father. Everything else is secondary." The landing at the capital spaceport went smoothly at first. The Port Authority cleared them immediately, and there were no visible signs of hostile activity. But, as they disembarked, Marcus noticed subtle indicators that something was wrong. The usual crowds of travelers and workers were absent, and many of the port's security guards were missing from their normal posts. "It's too quiet," whispered Corporal Vexthani as their convoy of vehicles moved through the empty streets. Marcus had to agree. A capital city should be bustling with activity, but the streets they traveled were nearly deserted. Either the population was hiding indoors, or they had been evacuated in anticipation of fighting. They were halfway to the Imperial Palace when the attack came. Energy beams lanced out from buildings on both sides of the street, striking their lead vehicle and disabling it instantly. The convoy came to a sudden halt as more weapons opened fire from concealed positions. "Ambush!" Commander Zethklar shouted into his communication device. "All units, combat formation." Marcus threw himself out of their vehicle just as an energy bolt struck where he had been sitting. He rolled behind cover and drew his weapon, scanning for targets among the surrounding buildings. His training kicked in, and he found himself moving with a coordination and purpose that surprised him. The attackers were well-positioned and well-armed, but they had made one critical mistake. They had assumed that Princess Lyralii's guard would follow standard defensive protocols and try to hold their position until reinforcements arrived. Instead, Commander Zethklar ordered an immediate counterattack. "Alpha Team, left flank. Beta Team, right flank. Delta Team, with me straight up the middle." The commander's voice carried clearly over the sound of weapons fire. "We punch through and keep moving." Marcus found himself assigned to Delta Team, which meant staying close to Princess Lyralii as they fought their way through the ambush. It was exactly the kind of situation his training had prepared him for, but experiencing it in reality was vastly different from any simulation. The enemy fighters were skilled, but they were not expecting the ferocity of the counterattack. Commander Zethklar led his warriors forward with the kind of tactical brilliance that had made him a legend among the royal guards. They moved like a precision instrument, each guard supporting the others while maintaining protection around the princess. Marcus stayed within arm's reach of Princess Lyralii, just as he had been trained. When an enemy fighter appeared in a window above them, Marcus was the one who spotted the threat and eliminated it before it could fire. When debris from an explosion threatened to strike the princess, Marcus was there to shield her with his own body. "The human fights well," observed Sergeant Killaner during a brief lull in the combat. "He fights like one of us," corrected Corporal Vexthani, which was the highest compliment the scout could give. They fought their way clear of the ambush zone and continued toward the palace. But it was obvious that the attack had been carefully planned. The enemy knew their route and had prepared multiple contingencies. This was not a random assault by rebels or criminals. This was the work of someone with access to high-level intelligence and significant resources. Duke Vextar, Princess Lyrelii, said grimly as they reached a secure communication point and contacted palace security. He's making his move while my father is incapacitated. The palace security coordinator, one of the few officers still loyal to Emperor Throndar, provided an update on the situation. Your Highness, the Duke's forces have seized control of the government quarter. They're demanding that the Emperor abdicate in favor of a regency council headed by the Duke. And my father's response? Princess Lyrelii asked. The Emperor has refused to see the Duke's representatives. But his condition continues to deteriorate. The physicians say. The officer's voice trailed off. Say what? Princess Lyrelii demanded. They say he may not survive another day, Your Highness. The urgency of their mission had just increased dramatically. If Emperor Throndar died without naming a successor, the empire would face a succession crisis that could tear it apart. Duke Vextar would claim the throne by right of conquest, but other factions would challenge his authority. Worlds would choose sides, and the resulting civil war could last for generations. New plan, Commander Zethklar announced. We go directly to the palace, no stops. Speed is now more important than stealth. Their convoy raced through the capital streets, taking the most direct route to the imperial palace. Behind them, they could see smoke rising from multiple locations where Duke Vextar's forces were engaged in fighting with troops loyal to the emperor. The palace itself was under siege when they arrived. Duke Vextar's soldiers had surrounded the massive complex, but they had not yet attempted to storm the defenses. The ancient walls and modern shield generators were holding, but it was obviously only a temporary reprieve. How do we get inside? Marcus asked as they surveyed the situation from a concealed position. Service tunnels, Princess Lyrelii replied. I know passages that even the Duke's spies haven't discovered. She led them to what appeared to be a maintenance entrance in the outer wall, hidden among the decorative stonework. A complex biometric scanner recognized her identity and opened a concealed door that led into the palace's underground service areas. The tunnels were narrow and poorly lit, clearly not designed for group movement. But Princess Lyrelii navigated them with the confidence of someone who had explored every corner of the palace during her childhood. They moved in single file, weapons ready, alert for any signs of enemy forces. There, the princess whispered as they reached another concealed entrance. This leads directly to the imperial residential quarters. They emerged into a corridor that Marcus recognized from intelligence briefings as being very close to Emperor Throndar's private chambers. But the corridor was not empty. Palace guards wearing the insignia of Duke Vextar's faction stood at regular intervals, obviously placed there to control access to the Emperor. 8 guards, Commander Zethklar counted quietly. We can take them, but the noise will alert others. Not necessarily, Marcus said, studying the corridor layout. Give me 2 minutes. Before anyone could object, Marcus slipped away into the service passages they had just left. His years as a maintenance worker had taught him how buildings functioned, and palaces were just very elaborate buildings. Every structure had environmental controls, power distribution, and communication systems that could be accessed and manipulated if you knew what you were doing. Marcus found the environmental control panel for that section of the palace and began making adjustments. Within minutes, the lights in the corridor began to flicker and dim, while the temperature started to rise noticeably. To the guards, it would appear that the palace's systems were malfunctioning under the stress of the siege. Right on schedule, 2 of the guards left their posts to investigate the apparent malfunction. That reduced the opposition from 8 to 6, evening the odds considerably. Marcus returned to find Commander Zethklar preparing to attack the remaining guards. Wait, Marcus whispered. There's a better way. He led them through another service passage that bypassed the guarded corridor entirely, emerging in an alcove just 50 meters from Emperor Throndar's chambers. The entrance to the imperial suite was guarded by only 2 soldiers, both of whom had their attention focused on the flickering lights and environmental problems. This time, the attack was swift and silent. Commander Zethklar and Sergeant Killiner disabled the guards without raising any alarm, and Princess Lorelei was through the door to her father's chambers within seconds. Emperor Throndar lay in a massive bed surrounded by medical equipment and worried physicians. The ruler who had commanded an empire spanning hundreds of worlds looked frail and diminished, his blue skin pale, and his breathing labored. "Father," Princess Lorelei said softly as she approached the bed. The emperor's eyes opened, focusing on his daughter with obvious effort. "Lorelei, you came." "Of course I came." She took his hand, and Marcus was struck by the tenderness in the gesture. Despite all the political maneuvering and succession struggles, this was simply a daughter concerned for her dying father. "The Empire," Emperor Throndar whispered. "Vextar seeks to destroy everything we have built." "The Empire will survive," Princess Lorelei assured him. "But I need your guidance. Name me as your successor, and I will preserve what you have created." Emperor Throndar struggled to speak, his voice barely audible. "The succession laws require the approval of the High Council. Half the High Council is dead or missing," Princess Lorelei replied. "The other half is scattered across the galaxy. There is no time for traditional procedures." The emperor closed his eyes, and for a moment Marcus thought he had died. But then he spoke again, his voice gaining strength through sheer force of will. "Bring me the seal of authority." One of the physicians quickly produced an ornate device that Marcus recognized as one of the symbols of imperial power. The emperor took the seal in trembling hands and pressed it into Princess Lorelei's palm. "By right of blood, and in recognition of your wisdom and courage, I name you my successor," Emperor Throndar declared. "You are hereby invested with the full authority of the Zephyrian throne." The moment was interrupted by the sound of explosions from elsewhere in the palace. Duke Vextar's forces were no longer content to wait outside the walls. "The Duke has begun his assault," Commander Zethklar reported after checking with palace security. "His troops have breached the outer defenses." "Then, we fight," Princess Lorelei said, now speaking with the authority of an empress. "Commander, what are our options?" "Limited," the commander admitted. "We can hold this position for a time, but the Duke has superior numbers. Eventually, they will break through." Marcus listened to the tactical discussion, but his mind was working on a different problem. They needed to escape the palace, but they also needed to ensure that Princess Lorelei's claim to the throne was recognized. That meant getting word to the loyal fleet commanders and the governors of the core worlds. "Your Majesty," Marcus said, then paused as he realized he had just addressed Princess Lorelei by her new title. "Speak," she commanded. "We need to reach the communication center. If we can broadcast your succession to the fleet and the provincial governors, the Duke's claim becomes much weaker." "The communication center is on the other side of the palace," Commander Zethklar pointed out. "We would have to fight our way through hundreds of the Duke's soldiers." "Not necessarily," Marcus replied. "The palace has maintenance tunnels that connect all the major systems. I can guide us there without going through the main corridors." Princess Lorelei looked at her father one final time. Emperor Throndar managed to nod weakly, giving his blessing to whatever course of action she chose. "We go," she decided. "Father, we will return when the palace is secure." The emperor smiled faintly. "I know you will, my daughter. You have become everything I hoped you would be." Marcus led the group back into the service tunnels, this time heading toward the communication center in the palace's central tower. The route was longer and more complex than their earlier journey, requiring them to climb through vertical shafts and crawl through spaces barely wide enough for a person. Behind them, they could hear the sounds of fighting growing closer as Duke Vextar's forces pushed deeper into the palace. Time was running out. When they finally reached the communication center, they found it abandoned except for a skeleton crew of technicians who were trying to maintain basic services despite the chaos. The senior technician, an elderly Zephyrian named Corthale, recognized Princess Lorelei immediately. "Your Highness, thank the ancestors you're safe. We've been trying to maintain contact with the fleet, but the Duke's jamming systems are interfering with our transmissions." "Can you break through the jamming?" Princess Lorelei asked. Possibly, but it would require overloading our transmission array. We might get one message out before the equipment burns out completely. Do it, she commanded. As the technicians worked to prepare the transmission, Marcus realized that they had reached the critical moment. Everything depended on whether Princess Lyralii could convince the fleet commanders and provincial governors to support her claim to the throne. If they chose to back Duke Vextar instead, the empire would be his. "Ready, Your Majesty," Corthale announced. Princess Lyralii stepped in front of the communication array, drawing herself up with all the dignity and authority of her new position. When she spoke, her voice carried the power of conviction and the weight of destiny. "Citizens of the Zephyrian Empire," she began, "I am Princess Lyralii, daughter of Emperor Throndar, and by his will and authority, I am now your empress. The emperor has died peacefully, naming me as his chosen successor." Marcus knew she was stretching the truth about her father's condition, but the political necessities required immediate action. "Duke Vextar has attempted to seize power through force and treachery," she continued. "He has attacked the imperial palace and threatens the stability of our empire. I call upon all loyal forces to reject his illegitimate claims and support the rightful succession." She paused, then added words that Marcus recognized as being directly inspired by recent events. "The empire has always been built on the principles of justice, honor, and the recognition of merit regardless of origin. These principles will guide my reign as they guided my father's." The transmission went out just as the communication equipment overloaded and died in a shower of sparks. Whether the message had reached its intended recipients was now a matter for hope and prayer. "Your Majesty," Commander Zethklar said urgently, "the Duke's forces have reached this level. We need to move immediately." As they prepared to leave the communication center, Marcus realized that the easy part was over. Now came the real test, whether Princess Lyralii could hold on to the throne she had just claimed, and whether the empire would accept a human as part of the royal guard of their new empress. The response to Empress Lyralii's transmission came faster than anyone had expected. Within 2 hours of the broadcast, Admiral Zethkorvan of the Third Fleet had declared his complete loyalty to the new empress and was moving his ships to orbit around Zephyr Prime. Governor Malthyss of the Core Worlds followed suit, officially recognizing Lyralii's claim to the throne and promising military support. But Duke Vextar was not finished. His forces had seized control of most of the imperial palace, and he was broadcasting his own messages claiming that Princess Lyralii's succession was invalid because it had not followed proper constitutional procedures. Some military commanders and provincial governors were choosing to support him, setting the stage for the civil war that everyone had feared. Marcus and the Royal Guard had managed to secure a section of the palace's eastern wing, using the defensive advantages of the ancient architecture to hold off superior numbers. But their position was precarious, and everyone knew that Duke Vextar would soon bring up heavy weapons that could breach even the palace's strongest fortifications. Status report. Empress Lyralii commanded as she reviewed the tactical situation in what had become their temporary command center. "We control approximately 15% of the palace complex," Commander Zethklar reported. "The Duke's forces hold the rest, but they haven't been able to dislodge us from this position." "What about external support?" she asked. "Admiral Zethkorvan's fleet has engaged Duke Vextar's ships in orbit. The fighting is intense, but preliminary reports suggest that our forces are holding their own." That was encouraging news, but Marcus could see the strain on everyone's faces. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and running low on supplies. Even if the loyal fleet eventually won the space battle, it might be too late for the defenders trapped in the palace. "Your Majesty," Marcus said during a brief pause in the briefing, "I have an idea that might help even the odds." Empress Lyralii turned to him with interest. "Speak." "The Duke's forces are confident because they control the main palace systems, communications, power, environmental controls. But I've been studying the maintenance tunnels and service areas. If I can reach the central control room, I might be able to disrupt their operations significantly." Commander Zethklar frowned. "That would be a suicide mission. The control room is deep in Duke-controlled territory, and it's heavily guarded." "Maybe," Marcus replied. But I know systems that the guards don't. I can move through areas they would never think to watch. Absolutely not, the commander said firmly. I cannot allow a member of the Royal Guard to undertake such a mission. With respect, sir, I'm not just a member of the Royal Guard, Marcus pointed out. I'm also a maintenance worker who knows how to sabotage complex systems without being detected. Empress Lyralii considered the proposal carefully. What exactly would you do if you reached the control room? Several things, Marcus explained. First, I could disrupt their communications, making it harder for them to coordinate their attacks. Second, I could selectively shut down power to key areas, forcing them to redeploy their forces. Third, and most importantly, I could access the palace's automated defense systems. That last point got everyone's attention. The Imperial Palace had been built with defensive systems that could repel attackers even if the regular guards were overwhelmed. But those systems had been shut down when Duke Vextar's forces entered the palace to prevent them from being used against the Duke's troops. If you could reactivate those defenses, Commander Zethklar said slowly, it would change everything. The risk is enormous, Empress Lyralii pointed out. If you're captured, the Duke will use you as leverage against us. Marcus had already considered that possibility. Your Majesty, if I'm captured, you must refuse any deal the Duke offers. The mission is more important than my life. Empress Lyralii studied him for a long moment. You understand that I cannot order you to undertake this mission. It must be your choice. I choose to go, Marcus said without hesitation. Very well, but you will not go alone. She turned to Corporal Vexthani. You will accompany Marcus. Your speed and stealth abilities will be invaluable. The Vexthani scout nodded. It will be my honor, Your Majesty. As they prepared for the mission, Marcus found himself thinking about how far he had come from his origins as a simple mechanic. Now he was about to undertake a critical mission that could determine the fate of an empire. The irony was not lost on him. Commander Zethklar pulled Marcus aside before they departed. I want you to know that regardless of what happens, you have proven yourself worthy of the Royal Guard. Your courage and dedication honor not only yourself, but your entire species. Thank you, sir, Marcus replied. That means more to me than you know. The journey to the central control room required them to travel through nearly 3 kilometers of service tunnels, avoiding patrols and security checkpoints. Corporal Vexthani's abilities proved invaluable, as the scout could detect approaching enemies long before they posed a threat. They encountered their first serious obstacle about halfway to their destination, where a major tunnel intersection was being guarded by a squad of Duke Vextar's soldiers. The guards were positioned to watch the main passages, but they had not considered the possibility of infiltrators using the air circulation ducts. Marcus and Vexthani spent nearly an hour crawling through the narrow air ducts, moving slowly to avoid making noise that might alert the guards below. The space was cramped and uncomfortable, but it allowed them to bypass the checkpoint entirely. Your knowledge of these systems is impressive, Vexthani whispered as they emerged from the air ducts on the other side of the checkpoint. 5 years of maintenance work, Marcus replied. You learn where everything is located. As they got closer to the central control room, the security became much tighter. The Duke's forces had clearly identified the control room as a critical asset that needed protection. Guards were stationed at every entrance, and mobile patrols moved through the surrounding corridors at regular intervals. How do we get past all of them? Vexthani asked as they surveyed the defenses from a concealed position. Marcus studied the layout, comparing it to his mental map of the palace's systems. We don't go past them. We go around them. He led Vexthani to what appeared to be a solid wall, but his scanner revealed a hidden access panel. When activated, the panel opened to reveal a maintenance crawlway that led directly to the control room's secondary systems area. Emergency access, Marcus explained. Every control room has one, in case the main entrances are blocked during a crisis. The crawlway was barely large enough for a person, and they had to move forward on their hands and knees. But it brought them directly into the control room complex without encountering a single guard. They emerged in a storage area filled with spare parts and backup equipment. Through a reinforced window, Marcus could see the main control room, where several technicians were working under the supervision of Duke Vextar's security officers. 6 technicians, for guards, Vexthani counted. I can handle the guards, but the technicians might raise an alarm. Leave the technicians to me, Marcus said. Most of them are probably just following orders. They might be willing to cooperate if given the right motivation. They waited until one of the guards left the control room on patrol, reducing the opposition to 3 armed enemies. Then, Vexthani struck with the lightning speed that made the scout species legendary warriors. The 3 guards were unconscious before they could even draw their weapons. The technicians, as Marcus had predicted, were more than willing to cooperate when presented with the choice between helping the rightful empress or being stunned unconscious. Within minutes, Marcus had access to the palace's central control systems. The first thing he did was disrupt communications throughout the Duke-controlled areas of the palace. Enemy units suddenly found themselves unable to coordinate with each other or receive orders from their commanders. The confusion was immediate and obvious, as Marcus could hear shouting and general disorder from the corridors outside. Next, he began selectively shutting down power to key areas. The Duke's command post lost lighting and environmental controls. Several guard stations found their security doors sealed shut. Weapons storage areas became inaccessible as their electronic locks engaged. But the most important task was reactivating the palace's automated defense systems. These ancient but effective mechanisms had been installed centuries ago to protect the imperial family from exactly this kind of internal threat. Energy barriers, automated weapons turrets, and mobile security drones could all be brought online from the central control room. Automated defenses active, Marcus announced as he completed the activation sequence. Targeting parameters set to distinguish between loyal forces and insurgents. The effect was dramatic. Throughout the palace, Duke Vextar's soldiers suddenly found themselves under attack by the building's own defense systems. Energy barriers cut off their escape routes. Weapons turrets emerged from concealed positions to engage enemy forces. Security drones swarmed through the corridors, forcing the invaders to take cover. Excellent work, Vexthani said as they monitored the results of Marcus's sabotage. The Duke's forces are in complete disarray. But their success had not gone unnoticed. Heavy footsteps in the corridor outside indicated that enemy reinforcements were approaching the control room. Time to go, Marcus said, quickly downloading critical data from the control systems before they left. They escaped through the same maintenance crawlway they had used to enter, but the route back to their own lines was no longer safe. The Duke's forces were conducting systematic searches, looking for the saboteurs who had caused so much chaos. The journey back took twice as long as their initial infiltration, as they had to avoid numerous patrols and search teams. At one point, they were forced to hide in a waste recycling facility for over an hour while enemy soldiers searched the surrounding area. When they finally reached the defensive positions held by the Royal Guard, Marcus was exhausted but triumphant. The automated defenses he had activated were systematically driving Duke Vextar's forces out of the palace, and communications intercepts indicated that the Duke himself was preparing to retreat. Outstanding work, Commander Zethklar said as he reviewed Marcus's report. The tactical situation has been completely reversed. Empress Lyralii was even more direct in her praise. Marcus, your actions today have quite possibly saved the Empire. The Duke's support is collapsing as word spreads of his failed coup attempt. Over the next few hours, the remaining Duke-controlled areas of the palace fell to the combination of automated defenses and advancing Royal Guard units. Duke Vextar himself managed to escape in a shuttle, but most of his supporters were captured or surrendered. The space battle in orbit also turned in favor of the loyal forces. Admiral Zethkorvan's tactical brilliance, combined with the moral authority of Empress Lyralii's legitimate claim to the throne, convinced several of Duke Vextar's fleet commanders to switch sides. By evening, the rebellion was effectively over. That night, as the palace was secured and order restored, Empress Lyralii held her first formal court session. The great throne room had been damaged during the fighting, but it still retained its majesty and grandeur. Citizens of the Empire, Empress Lyralii addressed the assembled nobles and officials. Today we have faced a grave threat to our stability and our values. Thanks to the courage and loyalty of those who stood firm, that threat has been defeated. She paused, then continued with words that would echo throughout the galaxy for generations to come. This crisis has taught us important lessons about the true nature of loyalty and courage. We have learned that worth is not determined by species or birth, but by character and actions. Her gaze found Marcus, standing at attention among the royal guard. Today, a human saved our empire, not through birth or position, but through skill, courage, and selfless dedication. This is a reminder that the empire's strength comes from all its citizens, regardless of their origins. The announcement that followed shocked the assembled court. Empress Lyralii formally appointed Marcus Chun as the first human member of the Imperial Council, with the specific responsibility of overseeing integration policies for all species within the empire. Furthermore, she continued, I hereby establish new policies regarding the status of humans within our empire. No longer shall they be relegated to manual labor and expendable positions. They shall be evaluated for all positions based on their merits and abilities. The political implications were staggering. In the space of a single day, the status of humans within the Zephyrian Empire had been transformed from indentured laborers to full citizens with opportunities for advancement. But not everyone was pleased with these developments. Lord Kethvarn, one of the more traditional nobles, rose to voice his objections. Your Majesty, he said carefully, while we all appreciate the human's service, these policy changes are extremely radical. The established order has served the empire well for centuries. Empress Lyralii's response was calm, but firm. Lord Kethvarn, the established order allowed a duke to nearly overthrow the empire while humans proved their loyalty beyond question. Perhaps it is time to question which traditions serve us well, and which simply serve to limit our potential. But, Your Majesty, another noble interjected, humans are known for their short lifespans and tendency towards self-interest. How can we trust them with important responsibilities? Before Empress Lyralii could respond, Commander Zethklar stepped forward. If I may, Your Majesty, I would like to address that concern. Proceed, Commander. I have observed Marcus Chun under the most demanding conditions possible. He has faced assassins, fought in battles, and undertaken dangerous missions without regard for his own safety. His dedication to protecting Your Majesty has been absolute and unwavering. The commander paused, then added with obvious conviction, if all humans possess even a fraction of his courage and loyalty, then the empire will be strengthened immeasurably by their full integration. The debate continued for some time, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Empress Lyralii had the authority to implement these changes, and recent events had provided overwhelming evidence of their necessity. As the court session concluded, Marcus found himself surrounded by beings offering congratulations and expressions of support. But he also noticed others who watched him with suspicion or barely concealed hostility. The path forward would not be easy. Later that evening, as the palace settled into its first peaceful night in days, Empress Lyralii requested a private meeting with Marcus in her study. You understand that everything has changed, she said as they sat in comfortable chairs overlooking the capital city. Yes, Your Majesty. For me, and for all humans. The position I've offered you comes with enormous responsibilities, she continued. You will be representing not just yourself, but your entire species. Every decision you make, every action you take, will be scrutinized and judged. Marcus nodded. I understand the pressure, Your Majesty. But I also understand the opportunity. For the first time in decades, humans,